My wife's funeral was quiet. Beside the grave, I received a message that made my blood run cold. It read simply, "I am alive. I am not in the coffin." My hands shook as I typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly, "I cannot say. They are watching us. Don't trust the children." Then I looked up at my son and daughter, and I discovered the horrifying truth. I am Bernard Freeman, 69 years old, and until 3 days ago, I thought I was just a grieving widower. But that text message changed everything. Before I tell you how my own children tried to end me, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to love you. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The wind at the cemetery was biting, cutting through my black suit like a knife, but the cold coming from my family was far worse. I stood at the edge of the open grave, staring down at the polished mahogany casket that supposedly held Esther, my wife of 40 years. My heart felt like a stone in my chest, heavy and lifeless. But as I looked around at the people standing with me, the grief began to mix with a creeping sense of unease. To my right stood Darius, my 35-year-old son. He was checking his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even looking at the grave. He was whispering into his Bluetooth earpiece, shielding his mouth with a gloved hand. I caught snippets of his conversation. Selling, liquidity, fast cash. He looked sharp in his tailored suit, the image of a successful financial advisor, but I knew better. I had seen the letters from the collection agencies he thought he had hidden. Darius was a man drowning in debt, and he looked at his mother's coffin not with sorrow, but with the impatient hunger of a man waiting for a check to clear. Next to him was Brittany, his wife. She was shifting her weight from foot to foot, audibly sighing. She adjusted her oversized designer sunglasses and leaned toward Darius, her voice a harsh whisper that carried on the wind. "Darius, this grass is sinking. These are Louboutins. If this takes much longer, my heels are going to be ruined." She looked at me not with sympathy, but with a look of pure annoyance, as if my wife's burial was a scheduling conflict that was inconveniencing her afternoon. And then there was Nia, my youngest. She was 30, and she was holding her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at her own face. She was live streaming. I watched as she squeezed her eyes shut, forcing a single perfect tear to roll down her cheek for her followers. She pouted her lips and whispered to the screen about the darkest day of her life, about how broken she was. But the moment she lowered the phone to check the comments, her face went blank. She tapped the screen, checking her engagement numbers, completely indifferent to the reality that her mother was being lowered into the ground 6 feet away. It was my turn. The pastor nodded at me. I stepped forward, my knees aching, clutching a handful of damp earth. I wanted to say goodbye. I wanted to tell Esther that I loved her, that I didn't know how to navigate this world without her. I raised my hand to throw the dirt. Buzz. My phone vibrated in my breast pocket. It was a long, sustained vibration, not a notification, but a demand for attention. I don't know why I checked it. Maybe I was looking for a distraction from the finality of the moment. I pulled it out with my free hand. The screen was bright against the gray sky. Unknown number. The message was short. "I am still alive. Trust no one." The world tilted. The sky seemed to spin. I gasped the air, leaving my lungs in a rush. I dropped the handful of dirt. It hit the casket with a hollow thud that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. My legs gave out. I stumbled forward, teetering on the edge of the grave. Strong hands grabbed my arms. It was Darius. But it wasn't a gentle, supportive grip. His fingers dug into my bicep with bruising force, pinching the muscle painfully. He hauled me back from the edge, his breath hot against my ear. "Pull it together, old man," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Stop making a scene. We need to get this done so we can meet the estate lawyer by 4. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what I had seen. He just wanted to hurry me along. I looked up at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger with dead eyes. I looked at Brittany, who was rolling her eyes at my stumble. I looked at Nia, who had panned her camera to capture my moment of weakness, probably captioning it, "Grief is so raw." I shoved the phone back into my pocket, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I am alive!" The words echoed in my skull. Was it a cruel prank, a scam, or was it possible? We walked back to the limousine in silence. The ride home was suffocating. The The partition was up, separating us from the driver. I sat facing backward, looking at the three of them. They weren't speaking to me. They were texting, scrolling, checking emails. I turned my head to the window, watching the rain streak against the glass, and my mind started to race, connecting dots I had been too blind to see before. I remembered last week. Esther had been complaining about her heart medication. She had been taking those pills for years, same brand, same dosage. But 2 days before she died, she pushed the bottle away at breakfast. "Bernie," she had said, her face scrunching up, "these taste wrong. They taste bitter, like metal." I had dismissed it. I told her it was probably a new generic formula, or that her taste buds were changing with age. I told her to take them anyway because the doctor said she needed them. God help me, I told her to take them. And then there was the night she died. It happened so fast. 1 minute she was watching television, the next she was gasping for air, clutching her chest. Darius had been there that night. He had come over for dinner, which was rare. He had insisted on making tea for everyone. Esther had collapsed 20 minutes after finishing her cup. I looked across the limo at Darius. He caught my eye and offered a thin, practiced smile. "You okay, Dad? You look a little pale. Don't worry about the house or the accounts. Brittany and I will handle all the paperwork. You just need to rest. Rest." That word sounded like a threat. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I covered the screen with my hand, shielding it from their prying eyes. It was the same number. "Do not eat the food at the wake." Nia put something in it. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I looked at Nia. She was applying fresh lip gloss, checking her reflection in her compact mirror. She looked harmless. Shallow, yes, but harmless. Could she really be capable of poisoning her own father? The car pulled into the driveway of the home Esther and I had bought 30 years ago. It was a large house, too large for just the two of us, but we had filled it with memories. Now it felt like a trap. Cars were already lining the street. Friends, neighbors, distant relatives, all here to pay their respects. Or so they said. We went inside. The house was filled with the smell of lilies and roasted meat. People came up to me, shaking my hand, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. I nodded. I shook hands, but I didn't hear a word they said. My hand was clamped over my phone in my pocket like it was a lifeline. "Dad." Nia appeared at my elbow. Her voice was sweet, sickly sweet. "You haven't eaten all day. You look like you're about to faint." She was holding a bowl of soup. It was a creamy potato soup, my favorite. Steam curled up from the surface. "I made this specially for you," she said, pushing the bowl into my hands. "It's your special recipe. I know how much comfort it brings you. Please, Dad, just eat a little bit. For Mom." The text message burned in my mind. Nia put something in it. I looked down at the soup. It looked normal. It smelled delicious. But as I looked closer, I saw tiny, undissolved flecks floating near the rim. Herbs, spices, or something else. I looked up at Nia. Her eyes were wide, expectant. She wasn't looking at my face. She was looking at the spoon. She was waiting. "I can't," I said, my voice trembling. "My stomach." "Dad, please," she insisted, her voice hardening just a fraction. "You need your strength. Just a few spoonfuls. Do it for me." She nudged my hand, forcing the spoon toward my mouth. The others in the room were watching now, the grieving daughter taking care of her elderly father. It was a performance, and I was the prop. I raised the spoon. I saw Darius watching from across the room, his body tense. Brittany had stopped talking to a neighbor and was watching me too. They were all watching. I brought the spoon to my lips. The smell was overpowering. My survival instinct kicked in sharp and sudden. I let my hand spasm. I jerked my wrist, crying out as if in pain. Oh, my hand. The bowl slipped from my fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a wet crash. Porcelain shattered. The thick, creamy soup splattered everywhere, soaking into the expensive Persian rug Esther had loved so much. "Oh, Dad," Nia cried out, but there was no concern in her voice, only sharp frustration. "Look what you did. I'm sorry," I stammered, backing away. "I'm so sorry. I'm just so shaky." Before anyone could move to clean it up, Buster, our old golden retriever, came trotting into the room. He had been sleeping in the kitchen, but the smell of the food had woken him. He was a good dog, slow and gentle, my constant companion. "No, Buster," I shouted, lunging forward, but I was too slow. And I was supposed to be an old, frail man. I couldn't move fast enough without breaking character, without revealing that I was stronger than I looked. Buster lapped up a huge mouthful of the soup from the floor. He He licked his chops, wagging his tail, and went in for more. Darius stepped forward. "Get the dog out of here," he snapped at Brittany. Brittany grabbed Buster's collar and yanked him back. "Oh, filthy animal. This rug is ruined, Bernie, absolutely ruined." She dragged the dog toward the kitchen. I stood there watching the puddle of soup, my heart racing. Had I imagined it? Was the text message a lie? Was I just a paranoid old man losing his mind with grief? 5 minutes passed. The guests went back to their conversations. Naya was in the kitchen getting paper towels, muttering angrily under her breath. Then a sound cut through the chatter. A high-pitched yelp followed by a thud. It came from the kitchen. I ran. I didn't care if I looked spry. I ran to the kitchen. Buster was on the floor. His body was rigid, his legs paddling the air uselessly. Foam white and pink with blood was bubbling from his mouth. His eyes were rolled back in his head. He was seizing violently. "Buster." I fell to my knees beside him. The guests crowded the doorway. Gasps, screams. Brittany was standing over the dog, looking not at the dying animal, but at her dress, checking for splashes. "What's wrong with him?" someone shouted. Darius pushed through the crowd. He looked at the dog, then at the puddle of vomit on the floor, the soup. He looked at Naya. Nia's face had drained of all color. She wasn't looking at the dog with sadness. She was looking at it with pure, unadulterated terror. She looked guilty. "He's having a seizure," Darius announced loudly, his voice commanding the room. "He's had epilepsy since he was a puppy. Everyone back up. Give him air." That was a lie. Buster had never had a seizure in his life. He was healthy as a horse. Darius grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me up. "Don't look, Dad. It's too upsetting for you. Go into the living room." He didn't want me to see. He didn't want me to connect the dots. But it was too late. I watched as Buster's movements slowed his breathing, turning into a wet rattle. I looked at Nia. She was trembling her hands over her mouth. She met my gaze, and for a split second the mask slipped. She wasn't sad about the dog. She was terrified because she knew that soup was meant for me. If I had eaten it, I would be the one foaming at the mouth on the kitchen floor. The text message was real. My wife was alive, and my children had just tried to murder me in my own home. The silence following Buster's collapse was broken not by weeping, but by a shriek of indignation. Brittany was pointing a manicured finger at the wet stain on the Persian rug where the soup had spilled. "Do you have any idea how much this cost?" she screeched. "This is vintage silk. It is ruined. Absolutely ruined." She wasn't looking at the dog, whose breathing was shallow and ragged. She was looking at the floor. Darius didn't even glance at her. He was staring at the dog with a cold calculation that made my stomach turn. He knew exactly what had happened. That dog was a loose end. That dog was evidence. "Get rid of it," he barked at one of the caterers, who was standing nearby looking horrified. "Take it to the vet. Tell them to put it down immediately. Do not run tests. Just cremate it." "No." I stepped forward, my voice trembling. "You can't just kill him. He might be okay." Darius spun around, and the look in his eyes was terrifying. He stepped into my personal space, forcing me to shrink back. "Look at what you did, Dad. You dropped the food. You fed it to the dog. You are confused. You are shaking. You are dangerous to yourself and everyone around you." He turned to the room, addressing the few remaining guests, his voice booming with fake concern. "I am so sorry, everyone. My father is not well. The grief has unmoored him. He doesn't know what he is doing." He turned back to me, gripping my shoulder hard enough to bruise. "This settles it. You are not staying here tonight. You are going to Sunny Meadows immediately." Sunny Meadows. It sounded like a resort, but I knew it was a warehouse for the forgotten. "Tonight," I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "But the funeral?" "No buts," Darius hissed. "You almost killed the dog. You made a scene at the graveside. You are losing your mind, Bernie. I have already called the van. They will be here in an hour. Go upstairs and pack a bag. Small bag only. You won't need much where you're going." He steered me toward the stairs like a naughty child. I looked back at Buster being carried out the back door by a stranger. My heart broke. They were erasing him just like they were trying to erase me. I climbed the stairs slowly, my legs feeling like lead. I needed to get to my bedroom. I needed to think. I needed to look at the message again, but as I passed the master bedroom, the door was ajar. I heard the sound of hangers clattering and drawers being ripped open. I pushed the door open. Brittany was inside. She had turned my wife's sanctuary into a disaster zone. Esther's clothes were pulled from the closet and thrown in a heap on the floor. Brittany was standing by the vanity, dumping the contents of Esther's jewelry box into her oversized Hermes bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice quiet. Brittany jumped, but she didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. She held up a string of pearls. Esther had worn those on our 30th anniversary. "I am clearing out the junk," she said, tossing the pearls into her bag as if they were Mardi Gras beads. "You are going away, Bernie. The house needs to be staged for sale. We can't have all this old clutter lying around." "Clutter." She called my wife's life clutter. "That was Esther's," I said, moving into the room. "Please put it back." She laughed, a harsh barking sound. "She is dead, Bernie. She doesn't need it. And honestly, this stuff is tacky. Costume jewelry, old lady clothes. I am doing you a favor by getting rid of it. I might get a few $100 for the lot at a pawn shop if I am lucky. It will help pay for your nursing home fees. You should be thanking me." I watched her shove a diamond brooch into her pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her wrist and throw her out of my house. But then I remembered the text message. "Trust no one. They are watching." I looked at the brooch. It sparkled under the room lights. Brittany thought she was stealing a fortune. She thought she was stripping us bare, but she didn't know. She didn't know that 3 years ago, when the neighborhood started getting rough, Esther and I had moved the real collection to a safety deposit box at the bank downtown. We had replaced everything in the house with high-quality replicas. Paste, glass, zirconia. The pearls she threw into her bag were plastic. The diamond brooch was worth maybe $50. I looked at Brittany. Her face twisted with greed and disdain. She thought she held the power. She thought she was taking everything from a helpless old man. I took a breath and let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble into a mask of defeat. "You are right," I whispered, looking at the floor. "It is just stuff. Take it," Brittany smirked. "Finally, you are making sense. Now go pack your things. The van will be here soon." I turned and walked away, leaving her to loot a treasure chest full of nothing. For the first time that day, I felt a spark of control. They thought I was weak. They thought I was stupid. Let them think it. It would make their fall so much harder. I went to the guest room where I had been sleeping since Esther got sick. I packed a small bag just as Darius had ordered. A few shirts, my toiletries, and my notebook. The little black book where I kept my passwords and account numbers. I tucked it deep inside a pair of rolled-up socks. I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Darius appeared in the doorway, filling the frame. He wasn't smiling anymore. He held a sheaf of papers in one hand and a pen in the other. "We need to handle this before you go," he said, walking into the room. He didn't ask permission. He slammed the papers down on the dresser. "What is this?" I asked, eyeing the thick stack. "Power of attorney," Darius said impatiently. "Total conservatorship. Look, Dad, you clearly can't handle your own affairs. The dog incident proved that. This just lets me and Brittany handle the bills, sell the house, and manage your accounts while you get the help you need." I looked at the document. It was a license to steal. If I signed that, I was signing away my freedom. I was signing away my life. "I can't sign this, Darius," I said, my voice trembling not with fear but with rage I was trying to suppress. "I need to read it. I need a lawyer to look at it." "We don't have time for lawyers." Darius snapped, his face reddening. "The van is 20 minutes away. You need to sign this now so we can pay for your care. Do you want to be kicked out on the street?" I sat down on the edge of the bed, clutching my bag. "I am tired, son. I am so tired. I can't read this without my glasses. Let me sleep on it. I will sign it tomorrow when you come to visit." Darius stared at me. I could see the violence behind his eyes. He wanted to force the pen into my hand. He wanted to make me sign, but he also wanted to keep up the appearance of the grieving son. He couldn't beat his father in a house full of funeral guests. "Fine," he spat. "Tomorrow. First thing in the morning. But don't think you are getting out of this." He grabbed the handle of the door. "You stay in here until the van comes," he said. "I don't want you wandering around causing more accidents." He stepped out and slammed the door. Click. The sound was unmistakable. The lock sliding home. He had locked me in my own house. The house I had paid for. The house where I had raised him. I went to the door and tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. I was a prisoner. I pressed my ear against the wood. I could hear them in the hallway. Brittany had joined him. "Did he sign it?" she whispered. "No," Darius growled. "The stubborn old goat wants to wait until tomorrow." "Tomorrow is too late," Brittany hissed. "The buyer is coming at 9 a.m. If we don't have the power of attorney, we can't close the deal. We need that cash, Darius. The loan sharks are not going to wait another week. I will make him sign it, Darius said, his voice low and dangerous. Even if I have to break his fingers to do it. Once he is in that nursing home, he is isolated. No one will hear him scream. We sell the house tomorrow. We liquidate the accounts by noon. I backed away from the door. My blood ran cold. They weren't just putting me in a home, they were selling everything out from under me within 24 hours. And they were desperate. Desperate people were dangerous people. I looked at the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the garden. I looked at my phone. No signal. They must have turned off the Wi-Fi router and I was in a dead zone. I was trapped. And I had until morning before my son came back to break me. The digital clock on the bedside table read 2:12 in the morning. The house was silent, a tomb built of betrayal. I stood by the window, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't just an old man locked in a guest room anymore. I was a logistics manager who had spent 40 years moving impossible loads through impossible situations. I looked at the window security bars. To anyone else, they looked solid. But 3 weeks ago, when Esther first whispered that her medicine tasted wrong, I had taken a screwdriver from the garage and quietly, methodically loosened the screws on the bottom brackets, just in case. I never thought I would actually have to use the escape route, but instinct is a funny thing. It knows the storm is coming long before you see the rain. I pushed. The metal groaned a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. I froze, waiting for the sound of footsteps in the hall. Nothing. Darius was likely sleeping the sleep of the arrogant confident he had won. I pushed again harder. The bottom of the grate swung out. Now came the hard part. I am 69 years old. My knees ache when it rains. My back is stiff in the mornings. I threw one leg over the sill, feeling the cold night air bite through my thin shirt. I gripped the trellis that ran down the side of the house. It was old wood covered in ivy. I prayed it would hold. I lowered my weight onto it. My shoulder protested a sharp stab of pain. I gritted my teeth. I would not die here. I would not let them win. I climbed down foot by foot, hand by hand. The rough wood scraped my palms. My breath came in short, jagged gasps. When my feet finally hit the mulch of the flower bed, I nearly collapsed. I crouched in the darkness, waiting for the floodlights to trigger. But they didn't. They must have cut the power to the sensors to save money. Cheap. Their greed was my cover. I crept toward the street, sticking to the shadows of the hedges I had trimmed for 30 years. A black sedan was parked half a block down, its engine idling silently. The window rolled down as I approached. A familiar face looked out from the gloom. Malcolm, my oldest friend, a retired private investigator with eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness. "Get in, Bernie," he said, his voice gravel and smoke. "We don't have much time." I slid into the passenger seat. The car smelled of stale coffee and old leather. It smelled like safety. We drove in silence for 10 minutes, putting distance between me and the house that had become my prison. We pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. It was deserted. Malcolm didn't look at me. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a thick manila folder and a digital recorder. He placed them on the dashboard. "You need to prepare yourself," he said. "What you are about to hear, it is going to hurt." I looked at the recorder. "Play it," I said. He pressed the button. The audio was grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. It was Darius and Nia. They were in the kitchen. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. "Are you sure this will work?" Nia's voice. She sounded nervous but excited, like a child planning a prank. "It's foolproof," Darius replied. His voice was calm. "Clinical. I got it from a contact in the city. It's a beta blocker cocktail. It will slow her heart rate down to almost nothing. To a paramedic, she will look dead. No pulse, no breath. The doctor will call it cardiac arrest. By the time they get her to the morgue, the drug will wear off, but she will be locked in a drawer. The lack of oxygen will finish the job. It is clean." I felt a scream building in my throat, hot and burning. I clamped my hand over my mouth. They hadn't just poisoned her. They had buried her alive. I choked out. "They killed her." Malcolm shook his head. "No. They tried." He opened the folder. Inside was a photo, a grainy image taken from a distance. It showed a hospital bed in a private room. And in the bed, hooked up to monitors, pale as a sheet but breathing, was Esther. "She is alive, Bernie." I grabbed the photo, my tears blurring the image. "How Esther has always been a fighter," Malcolm said. Her body metabolized the drug faster than they expected. She woke up in the transit van on the way to the funeral home. The driver, he is an old contact of mine. I had him on payroll to watch the house since you told me about the medicine. When she woke up, he didn't take her to the morgue. He brought her to a private clinic I use for sensitive cases. She woke up in a body bag. I whispered, the horror washing over me. My Esther. She woke up in the dark thinking she was dead. She is in a medically induced coma now, Malcolm said gently, to let her brain heal from the hypoxia. But she is stable. She is safe. Darius thinks she is ashes in an urn. He had a closed casket service for a reason. He didn't want anyone looking too closely. I stared at the photo of my wife. The pain in my chest was replaced by a cold, hard rage, a fury so deep it felt like ice in my veins. They had tortured her. For money. Speaking of money, Malcolm said, tapping his phone, you need to see this. He handed me the device. It was logged into my bank portal. I stared at the screen. My checking account, my savings, my retirement fund, 0, 0, 0. Darius didn't wait for the power of attorney, Malcolm said. He forged your signature on a digital transfer authorization 3 hours ago. He drained $50,000. It is gone, Bernie. He wired it to an offshore shell company. It is untraceable. I looked at the zeros. $50,000. That was our safety net. Our travel fund. Our life. He thinks he has won, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He thinks he has stripped me bare. He thinks I am a destitute old man who will rot in a state facility. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small notebook I had smuggled out in my sock. I opened it to the back page. There was a series of numbers and coordinates written in code. He doesn't know about Georgia, I said. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. The farm, I thought that was just swampland. That is what I let everyone believe, I said. It is heir property. Land passed down without a will since Reconstruction. My great-grandfather bought it. It has been in the Freeman name for 100 years. Darius thinks it is worthless dirt. He thinks it is a liability. I tapped the page. But 2 months ago, a tech giant reached out to me. They are building a massive data center corridor. They need that land. They need the water rights. They offered $10 million. Malcolm let out a low whistle. $10 million. And Darius doesn't know I never told him I said. I wanted him to make his own way. I wanted to see if he could build a life without a handout. I put the land in a blind trust years ago. The Freeman Trust. I am the sole trustee. Darius can't touch it. He can't sell it. He can't borrow against it. But he is going to try. Malcolm said. I know I said closing the notebook. That is the trap. He is already spending money he doesn't have. He is probably promising that land to his loan sharks right now. I looked out the window at the dark parking lot. He took my $50,000. He tried to kill my wife. He tried to lock me away. He wants a war. I will give him a war. But I won't fight him with fists. I will fight him with the one thing he worships. I will fight him with money, and when I am done, he won't just be broke. He will be broken. Drive me back, Malcolm. Back to the house. Are you crazy? I have to go back, I said. If I disappear now, he will get suspicious. He will run. I need him to think he has won. I need him to think I am the confused, helpless old man he wants me to be. I need to sign those papers. Malcolm looked at me like I had lost my mind. You are going to sign the power of attorney. You are going to hand him the gun. I smiled a cold, humorless smile. I am going to sign it, but I am going to use my own pen. The ink fades in 24 hours. By the time he tries to use it, the paper will be blank. Take me back, Malcolm. The show must go on. The smell of frying bacon was the first thing to greet them. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the window I had climbed out of only hours before. I had reattached the grate, tightened the screws, and wiped away my footprints. To the untrained eye, nothing had changed. I was just an old man enjoying a breakfast I had cooked for myself in a house that was no longer mine. I heard the footsteps on the stairs first. Heavy, urgent. Darius came around the corner, his tie already knotted, his phone in his hand. He stopped dead when he saw me. His eyes went to the guest room door, which was still locked from the outside, then back to me. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook. Brittany was right behind him, wearing a silk robe that I recognized as one Esther had received for her birthday 5 years ago. She shrieked when she saw me clutching the lapels of the stolen robe. "How did you get out?" Darius demanded, his voice cracking. "I locked that door. I have the key right here." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch. I looked at him with a vacant, watery smile. The door, son. It was wide open. I got hungry. You know how I get when my sugar drops. I made enough bacon for everyone. Do you want a plate? Darius stormed over to the guest room door. He rattled the handle. It was still locked. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. He was starting to doubt his own reality. That was good. An unstable enemy makes mistakes. I stood up, moving with the exaggerated stiffness of the elderly. I rinsed my plate in the sink. You were right, Darius, I said, keeping my back to him so he couldn't see the hard set of my jaw. I am not safe here. I get confused. I forget things, like the door. I could have sworn it was open. Maybe I am losing it. I turned around and looked at them. I tried to put every ounce of defeat I could muster into my posture. I slumped my shoulders. I let my hands tremble. Call the van, I said softly. I am ready to go to Sunny Meadows. I don't want to be a burden anymore. Brittany's eyes lit up. The fear vanished, replaced instantly by triumph. She didn't care how I got out. She only cared that I was giving up. She nudged Darius hard in the ribs. See, she hissed. He is lucid. Get the papers. Do it now before he changes his mind. Darius nodded, pulling a thick envelope from his briefcase. He cleared a space on the table, shoving aside my coffee mug. He laid out the power of attorney document. It was thick, dense with legal jargon, but the intent was simple. It gave him total control. My money, my house, my life. Sign here, he said, pointing to the line at the bottom. And here. An initial here. I patted my pockets, frowning. I need a pen. Darius held out a fancy gold fountain pen. Here, use mine. I shook my head, pushing it away. No. I can't write with those. The ink gets everywhere. I have my own. I always use my own pen for important business. It is bad luck otherwise. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out a plain blue ballpoint pen. It looked like something you would pick up for free at a bank. It was cheap plastic, scuffed and old. Darius rolled his eyes, impatient, but he didn't stop me. He just wanted the signature. He didn't know what that pen was. Back in my logistics days, when we managed shipping manifests for sensitive cargo that needed to be rerouted discreetly, we used specialized tools. This pen was a relic from the 80s. It was filled with a proprietary ink compound we used for temporary routing labels. It looked like standard blue ink when it hit the paper. It dried instantly, but the chemical composition was unstable. Upon contact with the acid in standard legal paper, it began a rapid oxidation process. In 12 hours, the blue would turn faint gray. In 24 hours, it would be completely invisible. The paper would be blank. I leaned over the document. I could smell Darius's cologne, expensive and overpowering, trying to mask the scent of desperation. I looked at his face. He was watching the tip of the pen with a hunger that was terrifying to behold. His eyes were wide, his pupils dilated. He wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at a winning lottery ticket. I signed my name. Bernard Freeman. The letters were bold and blue. Darius let out a breath he must have been holding for days. He snatched the paper away the second I lifted the pen, blowing on the ink as if to seal his victory. Done, he said, a grin splitting his face. He looked at Brittany. We are done. Brittany clapped her hands together, a sharp, greedy sound. Finally. I will call the movers. We can have this place cleared out by the weekend. They didn't even wait for me to leave the room before they started dividing up the spoils. They were already spending money they didn't have based on a signature that would vanish like smoke before the sun rose tomorrow. A horn honked outside, the transport van from Sunny Meadows. It was a beat-up white shuttle with rust around the wheel wells. It looked like a prison transport. Darius grabbed my small bag. Let's go, Dad. Don't want to keep them waiting. He escorted me to the door, his hand firm on my back, pushing me out. He wasn't walking me out. He was evicting me. I stepped onto the porch, the morning air cool on my face. The driver, a large man with a stained uniform, opened the sliding door. I paused, one foot on the step. I turned back to Darius and Brittany. They were standing in the doorway, practically vibrating with excitement. They wanted me gone so they could start tearing the house apart looking for cash. Wait, I said, patting my forehead as if I had forgotten something vital. The safe. Darius froze. What safe? In the basement, I said, lowering my voice to a conspirator's whisper. Behind the old boiler. I haven't opened it in 20 years. That is where I kept the bonds. The bearer bonds from the 80s. And the cash from the settlement. Brittany's eyes went wide. Bearer bonds, she whispered. Those are as good as cash. How much, Bernie? I shrugged, looking confused. I don't remember. Maybe 100,000, maybe more. I just left it there for a rainy day. But I can't remember the combination. Darius stepped forward, his greed overcoming his desire to get rid of me. Think Dad. What is the combination? I squinted, looking at the sky. It was a date, a special date. I looked at Darius, letting a soft, fatherly smile touch my lips. It was the day we brought you home, son. Your adoption day. April 4th, 0404. That was the happiest day of my life. So I made it the code to my treasure. It was a lie. There were no bonds. There was no cash. The safe was empty except for a single high-definition wireless camera I had installed 2 days ago pointing directly at the door. And the code wasn't his adoption day. That date meant nothing to him. He had never celebrated it. He only cared about his birthday. But he would try it. He would try every date he could think of. Darius looked stunned for a second, perhaps surprised that I held that memory so dear. But the sentiment evaporated instantly, replaced by the calculation of wealth. 0404. Got it. You should check it, I said. Just to be safe. Go, Darius said to the driver, slamming the van door shut. Take him. He didn't wave. He didn't say goodbye. He grabbed Brittany's hand and they turned, running back into the house. They didn't walk. They ran. They were like wild animals, scenting blood. As the van pulled away from the curb, rattling over the potholes, I watched through the dirty rear window. I saw the front door slam shut. I knew exactly where they were going. They were sprinting to the basement, to the dark, damp corner behind the boiler. They were rushing to punch a code into a steel box that contained nothing but a lens broadcasting their greed to the cloud. I sat back in the seat, the vinyl sticky against my back. I was on my way to a warehouse for the dying with nothing but the clothes on my back and a fading signature on a piece of paper. But as I watched my house disappear around the corner, I didn't feel afraid. I felt the cold satisfaction of a trap springing shut. They thought they had buried me. They had no idea they had just dug their own graves. Sunny Meadows was a lie wrapped in beige paint and the smell of industrial cleaner masking the scent of urine. The van dumped me at the curb like a sack of unwanted mail. The orderly who processed me was a boy barely out of high school with a stain on his scrubs and dead eyes. He took my bag, threw it onto a cart, and marched me down a hallway that flickered with dying fluorescent lights. This wasn't a care facility. It was a holding pen for the people society had decided to forget. My room was a 10-by-10 box with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The bed was a cot with a mattress as thin as a slice of bread. The roommate, a man who stared at the ceiling and hummed a single discordant note, didn't even turn his head when I walked in. Dinner was served at 5. It was a scoop of gray mash that smelled of sour milk and a piece of meat that defied identification. I pushed the tray away. I wasn't hungry. I was focused. I waited until the night nurse did her rounds. She barely glanced in the room, checking a box on her clipboard without breaking her stride. Once her footsteps faded down the hall, I reached into the hidden lining of my jacket. Darius and Brittany had checked my bag, but they hadn't patted me down. They assumed I was a helpless old man who didn't know how to use technology. I pulled out my smartphone. It wasn't a jitterbug. It was the latest model, fully encrypted with a direct link to the Freeman Trust secure server. My hands, which had trembled so convincingly in front of my son, were now steady as a surgeon's. I opened the banking app. I saw the pending transfer of the $50,000 Darius had stolen. It was sitting in a holding account waiting to clear international wires. I tapped a sequence of codes. I couldn't stop the $50,000, not yet, but I could scorch the earth around it. I initiated the lockout protocol. Every asset connected to my social security number, every joint account I had mistakenly opened with Darius years ago to help him build credit, every card authorized under my name, freeze, freeze, freeze. Then I opened the app connected to the camera I had installed in the safe. The feed was dark, illuminated only by the infrared sensor, but the audio was crisp. I could hear thumping. I could hear muffled shouting. I typed a message to Malcolm. I am in position. Initiate Phase 2. I sat back on the thin mattress, the blue light of the phone illuminating my face. The smell of the room was nauseating, a mix of stale sweat and despair, but I breathed it in deep. It was the smell of the bottom. And from the bottom, the only way to go is up. I wasn't trapped here. I was the general in the bunker, and the first missiles had just been launched. 5 miles away, my house was vibrating. I could see it on the security feed from the living room camera I had hidden in the smoke detector. Darius and Brittany hadn't waited for the ink to dry on the power of attorney before they started the celebration. They had invited people over. Not friends, really, but the kind of people they wanted to impress. The sharks, the climbers, the people who measured worth by the label on your handbag. The music was loud, a thumping bass that rattled the crystal in the china cabinet. I watched on my small screen as strangers walked through my home with their shoes on, spilling drinks on the furniture Esther had polished every Sunday for 40 years. Brittany was in the center of the room, holding a glass of my vintage scotch. She was wearing one of Esther's silk scarves wrapped around her neck like a trophy. She was shouting over the music, gesturing wildly with her free hand. "We are going to gut the kitchen first," she screamed to a woman who looked bored. "Knock out that wall. Open concept. Everything white marble. The old layout is so depressing. It smells like old people." I watched Nia. She was in the corner ring light setup doing a live stream. She was showing off a stack of cash, my emergency fund, from the cookie jar, fanning it out like a deck of cards. "Inheritance life," she chirped to her phone. "Sad day, but we move on. Big things coming. Watch this space." But the real show was on the second feed. The basement. Darius wasn't at the party. He was downstairs sweating through his dress shirt. He was kneeling in front of the safe, a flashlight clamped between his teeth. He punched in the code. 0404. The light on the keypad blinked red. He tried again. Slower this time. 0404. Red. I watched him slam his fist against the steel door. He didn't know that I had changed the code remotely 10 minutes ago. He didn't know that the code was now the date of Richard's funeral. He would never guess that. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. My phone in the nursing home remained silent because I had blocked him. I watched him scream into the voicemail, his face contorted with rage. I switched back to the living room feed. Brittany was laughing, throwing her head back. She looked like a queen on her coronation day. She had no idea the castle was made of sand and the tide was coming in. They were celebrating a victory that hadn't happened. They were spending money that didn't exist. They were dancing on the grave of a man who was watching them from the afterlife, holding the remote control to their destruction. The doorbell rang. I switched camera views to the front porch. It was a delivery driver struggling under the weight of 3 cases of Dom Perignon. This was it. The high-end liquor store downtown. Darius must have ordered it express. That order alone was worth $5,000. I watched Brittany sashay to the door. She threw it open, the noise of the party spilling out into the quiet street. Finally, she yelled, "We are dying of thirst in here. Bring it in. Put it on the island." The driver, a burly man who looked like he had no patience for rich people's nonsense, lugged the boxes inside. He set them down and pulled out a handheld card reader. "Total is $5,240, he said flatly, plus tip. Brittany waved a hand dismissively. She pulled a credit card from her pocket. It was my card, the Platinum Rewards card she had stolen from my desk. "Just swipe it," she said, not even looking at him. "And add 20% for yourself." She turned back to her guest, shouting, "Champagne is here, everyone! Get your glasses ready." The driver swiped the card. Beep. He looked at the screen. He frowned. He swiped it again. Beep. Brittany turned around, her smile faltering slightly. "What is the holdup? Card is declined," the driver said. Brittany let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. That card has a $50,000 limit. Try it again." The driver sighed and swiped a third time. Beep. Declined. Pickup card. He held it out to her. "It is dead lady. Do you have another one?" The room went quiet. The music seemed to drop in volume. The guests, sensing blood in the water, stopped talking and turned to watch. Brittany's face flushed a deep, ugly red. She snatched the card back. "That is impossible. The old man must have messed up the bill." "Fine." She reached into her purse and pulled out another card. This one was hers, or rather a joint card attached to Darius's account. "Use this one, and hurry up. Swipe." Beep. Declined. The silence was deafening now. Even Nia had stopped streaming. She was staring at her mother with wide, horrified eyes. "There is a problem with your machine," Brittany snapped, her voice rising an octave. The driver looked her dead in the eye. "Machine works fine. I just ran a card at the house next door. Your money is no good. Darius came running up the basement stairs, drawn by the silence. He looked disheveled, sweat stains on his collar. "What is going on?" he demanded, trying to regain control of the room. "Your wife can't pay for the booze," the driver said, crossing his arms. "I need payment now or I am taking it back." Darius laughed, a nervous cracking sound. "Of course we can pay. Here." He pulled out his sleek black business card, the one he used to impress clients, the one linked to the account where he hid his commission checks. The account I had flagged for fraud investigation 30 minutes ago. Swipe, beep, declined, contact issuer. The sound echoed through the room like a gavel strike. The guests began to whisper. I saw a woman in pearls lean over to her husband and murmur something. They put their glasses down on the table and started backing toward the door. "This is a mistake," Darius shouted, his voice cracking. "I have plenty of funds. Call the bank." "I am not calling anyone," the driver said. He grabbed the top case of champagne. "You want the bubbly, you pay cash. 5 grand. Right now." Darius patted his pockets. He looked at Brittany. She shook her head. They didn't have $5,000 in cash. They were living on credit and borrowed time, and I had just canceled both. The driver laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "That is what I thought. Posers." He picked up the boxes one by one and marched them back out the door. The guests didn't wait. They fled. I watched them stream out of the house, muttering about embarrassment and wasted time. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty. Darius, Brittany, and Nia stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by half-eaten appetizers and the wreckage of their dignity. The silence was absolute. I sat on my cot in the nursing home and took a bite of the cold gray mash. It tasted like victory. The morning sun hit the marble floors of the First National Bank, creating a glare that matched the headache pounding behind Darius's eyes. He walked in like he owned the place, clutching his leather briefcase with a grip so tight his knuckles were white. He bypassed the line, walking straight to the desk of the branch manager, Mr. Henderson. Darius didn't have an appointment, but men like Darius didn't think they needed one. He needed cash, and he needed it 10 minutes ago. His phone had been buzzing nonstop since dawn with texts from numbers he didn't recognize, messages that were short, violent, and demanding repayment. Mr. Henderson looked up, his smile tight and professional. "Darius, good to see you. How can I help you today?" "I need to make a withdrawal," Darius said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "A significant one. I am executing a power of attorney for my father, Bernard Freeman. I need to liquidate his savings and transfer the deed to the property on Elm Street into my name immediately." He slammed the thick envelope onto the mahogany desk. This was his moment. The moment he stopped being the son drowning in debt and became the master of the estate. He opened the envelope and pulled out the document with a flourish, sliding it across the desk. "Everything is in order," Darius said, leaning back in the chair, crossing his legs. "I watched him sign it myself yesterday." Mr. Henderson put on his reading glasses. He looked down at the paper. He frowned. He looked up at Darius, then back at the paper. He flipped the page, then another. "Darius, is this a joke?" Mr. Henderson asked, his voice cooling. Darius scoffed. "A joke? I don't have time for jokes. Just process the transfer." Mr. Henderson spun the document around and pushed it back across the desk. "There is nothing here, Darius. It is blank." Darius stared at him. He looked down at the paper. The lines of text were there, the legal boilerplate, the clauses. But at the bottom of the page, where I had pressed my blue pen firmly into the fiber where the ink had flowed bold and bright just 24 hours ago, there was nothing. Just pristine white space. The signature was gone. The oxidation process was complete. "No," Darius whispered. "That is impossible. I saw him sign it. It was blue ink. It was right there." He grabbed the paper, holding it up to the light, shaking it as if he could shake the ink back into existence. He used invisible ink. Darius shouted, his composure shattering. That senile old bat used trick ink. Mr. Henderson reached for the silent alarm button under his desk. "Darius, please lower your voice. You are disturbing the other customers. If you don't have a signed legal document, I cannot give you access to Mr. Freeman's accounts. In fact, given the irregularity, I'm going to have to flag these accounts for potential fraud." "Fraud!" Darius screamed, slamming his fist onto the desk. "I am the victim here. He tricked me. He is sitting in a nursing home right now, laughing at me. Give me the money. It is my inheritance." 2 large security guards materialized at Darius's elbows. They didn't ask him to leave. They grabbed him. One took his left arm, the other his right. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? Darius thrashed his expensive suit jacket, tearing at the seam. I am a wealth manager. I will buy this bank and fire all of you. They dragged him backward across the lobby. His heels skidded on the marble. He looked like a petulant child being carried out of a toy store. The other customers watched in silence, their eyes wide. Darius was thrown out onto the sidewalk, his briefcase tossed after him. It burst open, scattering blank papers into the wind. He scrambled to pick them up, cursing, weeping, realizing that the golden ticket he thought he held was nothing but scrap paper. Across town, Brittany was walking into the glass-walled conference room of Prestige Realty. She was wearing her best power suit, trying to project an air of unbothered success despite the disaster of the party the night before. She needed a win. She needed to close a deal to get a commission check that would cover the minimum payment on her maxed-out credit card. Her boss, a stern woman named Mrs. Galloway, was already sitting at the head of the table. But she wasn't alone. 2 uniformed police officers stood by the window. The company's head of legal was there too, holding a thick file. Brittany stopped in the doorway, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, I didn't know we had a meeting. Is this about the promotion?" "Sit down, Brittany," Mrs. Galloway said. Her voice was ice. Brittany sat, her eyes darting to the police officers. "What is going on?" "We received a tip this morning," Mrs. Galloway said. "An anonymous tip from a major shareholder in our parent company. They provided us with forensic accounting logs regarding your escrow accounts." Brittany's heart stopped. She had been skimming from the escrow funds for months, floating personal expenses and paying them back before anyone noticed. Or so she thought. "We did an internal audit," Mrs. Galloway continued. "You have embezzled over $12,000 in client funds to pay for luxury goods, handbags, shoes, champagne." "That is a lie," Brittany stammered, her face draining of color. "I would never." "We have the receipts, Brittany. And we have the digital trail." The shareholder who tipped us off was very thorough. She didn't know that the shareholder was a holding company I had acquired 10 years ago as a silent partner. I had been watching her career for a long time, waiting for her to slip. I didn't need to push her. I just needed to shine a light on what she was already doing. "You are fired, effective immediately," Mrs. Galloway said. "And these officers are here to escort you out. We are pressing charges for grand larceny." Brittany stood up, knocking her chair over. "You can't do this. My father-in-law is Bernard Freeman. He is rich. He will sue you into the ground." "Bernard Freeman is the one who sent us the file," Brittany, Mrs. Galloway said quietly. The air left the room. Brittany looked at the officers, then at her boss. The realization hit her like a physical blow. I wasn't just a senile old man. I was the architect of her destruction. She was led out of the office in handcuffs, passing by the cubicles of the co-workers she had looked down on for years. She was crying, her mascara running, pleading with anyone who would listen that it was all a mistake. But no one looked up. They just kept typing. 5 miles away, Nia was speeding down the interstate in her Porsche Cayenne. She was driving fast, weaving through traffic, desperate to get to the pawn shop before it closed. She had grabbed the silver from the dining room table before leaving the house, the only real thing left that wasn't glued down. She needed gas money. She needed to get away from the mess her family had become. She blasted music to drown out her panic. She checked her rearview mirror to admire her reflection, but instead of her own eyes, she saw flashing blue and red lights. "Damn it," she muttered, slapping the steering wheel. She pulled over to the shoulder, rolling down the window as the officer approached. She put on her best innocent smile, the one she used to get out of speeding tickets. "I am so sorry, officer," she chirped. "Was I going a little too fast? I am just so upset. My grandfather is in the hospital and—" "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," the officer barked, his hand resting on his holster. Nia blinked. "Excuse me, step out of the vehicle, now." She opened the door and stepped out, her legs shaking in her designer boots. "What is this about?" "This vehicle was reported stolen 2 hours ago," the officer said, spinning her around and cuffing her hands behind her back. "Stolen!" Nia shrieked. "It is my car. My dad bought it for me." "The registration is in the name of Bernard Freeman," the officer said, "and Mr. Freeman reported it stolen this morning. He said a family member took it without permission and was fleeing the jurisdiction." Nia struggled against the cuffs. "My dad is Bernard's son. He gave me the car. The report says unauthorized use. And since the owner pressed charges, you are under arrest for grand theft auto." They put her in the back of the cruiser. She watched through the wire mesh as a tow truck backed up to her beloved Porsche. She screamed and kicked the window, but the sound was swallowed by the traffic. She was alone, arrested for stealing a car she thought was her birthright, reported by a grandfather she thought was helpless. That evening the house was dark and silent. The electricity had been cut an hour ago. Darius, Brittany, and Naya, who had been bailed out by a friend using the last of her savings, sat in the living room by the light of a single candle. They looked like refugees from a war they didn't know they were fighting. Darius's suit was rumpled and stained. Brittany's eyes were swollen shut from crying. Nia was picking at her nail polish, shaking with residual adrenaline. "We have nothing," Darius whispered, staring into the flame. "Nothing. The bank accounts are frozen. The cards are dead. The house. The foreclosure notice was on the door when I got back." "How did he do this?" Brittany sobbed. "He is an old man. He eats dinner at 4 p.m. How did he do this to us?" "He played us," Darius said, his voice hard. "He played us all. The blank paper, the safe, the fake jewelry. He knew. He knew everything." Nia looked up, her eyes wild. "What are we going to do?" "Dad, I have a court date next week. I can't go to jail. I am an influencer. I can't be a felon. And I have the loan sharks texting me every 5 minutes," Darius said, holding up his phone. "They want 50,000 by Friday or they start breaking legs." Silence settled over them, heavy and suffocating. They were trapped. They had no resources, no allies, and no way out. "There is only one way," Brittany said softly. Her voice was trembling, but her eyes were focused. "We need him." Darius laughed bitterly. "Need him? He hates us. He destroyed us." "We need his signature," Brittany insisted. "A real one, on a real document. We need to get him back here. We need to bring him home." And then what Darius asked. "He won't sign. He is too smart." "He is smart," Brittany said, leaning forward into the candlelight, her face twisting into a mask of desperation. "But he is also sick, or at least he can be." "What do you mean?" Nia asked. "We bring him home," Brittany said. "We play the repentant family. We tell him we are sorry. We tell him we made a mistake. And then we make sure he gets sick. Really sick." "You mean poison him again?" Darius asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Like Mom." "No," Brittany said. "Not poison. That is too risky now. We use drugs. Hallucinogens. Sedatives. We keep him confused. We keep him pliable. We get a doctor, a crooked one. I know a guy from my old job, to declare him mentally incompetent for real this time. We get the conservatorship signed while he is too high to know his own name." Darius looked at her. He looked at the shadows dancing on the walls. He looked at his phone where the threats were piling up. He didn't see a father he had wronged. He saw a signature that could save his life. "Fine," he said. "We go get him tomorrow. We bring him home. And we don't let him leave until we own everything." They huddled closer around the candle, plotting their final move, unaware that the camera in the smoke detector above their heads was recording every word, beaming their conspiracy directly to the cloud where I was watching, waiting, and preparing the final blow. They came for me just after lunch. I was sitting in the plastic chair by the window, watching rain streak the brick wall when the door flew open. It wasn't the orderly with the dead eyes. It was Darius and Brittany. They looked like they had been through a war zone. Darius's suit was wrinkled and he had dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. Brittany was wearing sweatpants and oversized sunglasses, likely to hide eyes swollen from crying over her lost job and public humiliation. But the moment they saw me, the mask slid into place. "Oh, Dad," Darius choked out, rushing to my side. "Look at this place. It is terrible. We had no idea. We thought it was a luxury facility." Brittany chimed in, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "We have been so worried, Bernie. We haven't slept. We realize we made a terrible mistake. We can't leave you here. You are family. You belong at home with us." I looked at them with my mouth slightly open, letting a little drool gather at the corner of my lips. I made my hands shake. I made my eyes lose focus. I had to sell this. I had to make them believe I was a broken, confused old man, so they would bring me back into the belly of the beast. "Home," I whispered, my voice raspy. "I want to go home. Is Esther there? Is she making roast?" Darius exchanged a look with Brittany, a look of pure relief mixed with predatory excitement. He patted my hand. "Yes, Dad. Mom is waiting for you. Let's get you out of here." They signed me out with a speed that was almost suspicious. They practically dragged me to the car. It wasn't the Mercedes. It was a rental sedan, cheap and smelling of stale cigarettes. They had lost their cars. Good. The ride back was tense. They tried to make small talk, asking me if I remembered where I kept certain documents, if I remembered my passwords, but I just rambled about the weather and my dog Buster asking if he had been fed. I saw Darius grip the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He was losing patience. He needed me lucid enough to sign, but confused enough not to ask questions. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked dark. The lawn was overgrown. The curtains were drawn tight. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. They ushered me inside. The furniture was gone. The living room was empty save for a few folding chairs and a card table. They had sold everything they could carry. "Where is the sofa?" I asked, looking around in confusion. "We are redecorating, Dad," Brittany said quickly, guiding me toward the bedroom. "Just for you. Now you need to rest. You look exhausted." They led me to the master bedroom. My bed was still there, but the sheets were stripped. They sat me down. "We have a surprise for you," Darius said. "A doctor, a specialist. He is going to give you something to help you think clearly, to help you feel better." A man walked in. He wasn't wearing a white coat. He was wearing a cheap suit that was too tight across the shoulders. He carried a black medical bag that looked like it had seen better days. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't look me in the eye. He just opened the bag and pulled out a syringe and a vial of clear liquid. "This is Dr. Thorne," Darius said. "He is a friend." Dr. Thorne tapped the syringe. His hands were steady, but his fingernails were dirty. "This will help him relax," he said, his voice flat. "It will open his mind, make him more cooperative." I knew what it was. Scopolamine, or maybe a high dose of ketamine, truth serum, mind eraser. They weren't trying to heal me. They were trying to break my brain so I would sign whatever they put in front of me and not remember a thing when I woke up. Or worse, never wake up at all. I panicked, genuine panic this time. If they injected me, I was done. I couldn't fake my way through a chemical lobotomy. "No needles," I shouted, standing up and knocking the chair back. "No needles. I hate needles." Esther said no needles. I flailed my arms, acting out a violent, senile episode. I knocked the syringe from the doctor's hand. It clattered to the floor. "Hold him down," Darius screamed, grabbing my arms. I fought them, kicking and screaming. I had to make it impossible to inject me without leaving marks, without it looking like a struggle. Dr. Thorne swore. "He can't take the shot if he is moving like this. I risk hitting a nerve." "Give him the oral solution," Brittany yelled. "Just shut him up." The doctor grabbed a bottle of thick pink liquid from his bag. "Hold his nose." Darius clamped his hand over my nose, forcing my mouth open. The doctor poured the liquid in. It tasted like bitter almonds and chemical fire. I gagged. I coughed, but I didn't swallow. I held the thick liquid in the back of my throat, letting it pool under my tongue. I went limp in Darius's arms, letting my eyes roll back, feigning a sudden collapse. "He swallowed it," Dr. Thorne said, watching me slump. "Give it 10 minutes. He will be in La La Land." They laid me back on the mattress. Darius wiped his forehead, sweating profusely. "Watch him," he ordered Brittany. "I need to make a call." As soon as they turned away, I coughed, turning my head into the pillow. I spit the pink sludge into the fabric, pressing my face down to hide the stain. I managed to expel most of it, but I could feel the residue burning my gums. I needed to neutralize it. "Water," I moaned weakly. "Water." Brittany rolled her eyes, but she grabbed a glass from the nightstand and held it to my lips. I drank greedily, washing the poison out of my mouth and spitting the backwash back into the glass when she looked away. I lay there focusing on my breathing. I pinched the soft skin of my inner thigh, hard, sharp pain to keep my mind sharp. I had to stay awake. I had to hear what came next. 10 minutes passed. My eyelids felt heavy, not from the drug, but from exhaustion. I let them droop. I let my jaw go slack. I started to mutter nonsense words. "He is out," Dr. Thorne said, checking my pupils. "The lights are on, but nobody is home. He is in a suggestive state. You can get him to sign now." "Good," Darius said. "Get the papers." I heard the rustle of documents. I felt a pen being pressed into my hand. "Sign here," Darius whispered into my ear. "Just sign your name and you can go see Mom. She is waiting for you." I scribbled a line, a jagged, illegible scrawl. Again Darius hissed, "Do it right. Bernard Freeman." I tried again. This time I made it look a little more like my name, but still shaky. Still the signature of a man who didn't know what day it was. That will have to do, Brittany said. It matches the medical report of declining faculties. It actually helps us. Now get out, Darius said to the doctor. I will wire you the rest of the money when the land sells. I heard the doctor leave. The front door closed. I was alone with my son and his wife. Darius began to pace the room. I could hear the click of his dress shoes on the hardwood. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. He put it on speaker. Mr. Russo, Darius said, his voice changing instantly from bully to groveling servant. It is done. I have the signature. The deed transfer is ready. A deep, gravelly voice answered, a voice that sounded like grinding rocks. You are cutting it close, Darius. My partners are getting impatient. Are you sure the old man signed the right lot? I am sure, Darius said. The Georgia property, Sector 4. The coordinates match the survey you sent me. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was terrified they would see it through my shirt. Georgia, Sector 4. I had never told Darius about the Georgia land. I had never told him about the tech corridor. I had kept that file hidden in a safe deposit box in a different state. The only way he could know those coordinates was if he had found my master ledger. But I had the ledger with me. Unless he hadn't found it. Unless someone had given it to him. The tech company, Mr. Russo said. They are breaking ground in 3 days. They need that water rights access. They are paying $10 million for the acquisition. You give me the deed, I give you your life back, plus a finder's fee. You screw this up, and I take your kidneys. $10 million, Darius whispered. I thought it was just a few $100,000. We did our homework, Darius. Mr. Russo laughed. Your father was sitting on a gold mine, a data center hub, the most valuable dirt in the state, and the old fool was just growing pine trees on it. Bring me the deed tonight. I will, Darius said. I will be there in an hour. The call ended. Did you hear that Brittany whispered, her voice trembling with greed? $10 million. Darius, we are going to be richer than we ever imagined. We can pay off everything. We can move to Europe. We never have to work again. Darius laughed, a sound of pure manic relief. I knew it. I knew he was holding out on us, that selfish old bastard. He had $10 million in dirt, and he let me struggle. He let me drown in debt while he sat on a fortune. He walked over to the bed. I felt his hot breath on my face. You hear that, Dad? He whispered, thinking I was lost in a hallucinogenic fog. I won. I took it all, and you are going to rot in this empty house until the state comes to collect you. He didn't know. He didn't know that the signature on that deed transfer was written with a shaky hand on purpose, but it was missing one crucial element. I hadn't used my middle initial. The deed to the Georgia land was registered to Bernard T. Freeman. Without the T, the transfer was invalid. It would be flagged by the county clerk instantly. And he didn't know that the Mr. Russo he was talking to wasn't just a developer. He was the head of the local syndicate, a man who didn't tolerate mistakes. A man who had just been promised a $10 million payday by a desperate man holding a worthless piece of paper. Darius and Brittany ran out of the room. I heard them running around the house, gathering the last of their things, preparing to meet the mobster. I waited until the front door slammed. I opened my eyes. The room was spinning slightly from the residue of the drug, but my mind was clear. I sat up. I reached for the glass of water and splashed it on my face. I pulled my phone from the hidden pocket in my undershirt. I dialed Malcolm. They are heading to the warehouse district. I said, my voice raspy. Darius is meeting Russo. He thinks he is selling the Georgia land for $10 million. And the signature, Malcolm asked. Invalid, I said. Malcolm chuckled darkly. Russo is going to be very unhappy when he finds out he bought a napkin. Call the police, I said. Tell them there is a drug deal going down at the warehouse. Tell them to bring the heavy artillery. And Malcolm, yeah, Bernie. Come get me, I have one more performance to give. I need to be in court tomorrow, and I need to look like a man who just came back from the dead. The fluorescent lights of the county courthouse hummed with a sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper. I sat at the defendant's table, hunched over in my wheelchair, looking every bit the part of the confused invalid my son desperately needed me to be. My hands trembled in my lap, not from age or infirmity, but from the sheer effort of holding back my rage. Darius and Brittany sat at the plaintiff's table across the aisle. They looked impeccable. Darius wore a navy suit that likely cost more than my first car, and Brittany was dressed in a modest gray skirt suit that screamed concerned daughter-in-law. They held hands tightly, presenting a united front of grieving children forced to make a difficult decision. The Honorable Judge Beverly Higgins presided over the bench. She was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for having zero patience for family drama. She looked at the petition in front of her and then down at me. "Mr. Freeman, is it true that you do not have legal counsel?" she asked, her voice echoing in the sterile room. I looked up, my mouth slightly open, my eyes struggling to focus. I mumbled something incoherent about my dog Buster and looked around the room as if I did not know where I was. Darius stood up, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, my father refused counsel. He insisted he didn't need it because he believes he is currently on a cruise ship in the Bahamas. This is exactly why we are filing for emergency guardianship. He is completely detached from reality." Judge Higgins frowned. "Proceed with your witness." Darius took the stand first. He was a master manipulator. He painted a picture of a slow, agonizing decline. He talked about the fire in the kitchen which he had staged. He talked about my wandering at night. He talked about my violent outbursts. It breaks my heart. "Your Honor," Darius said, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye, "I love my father. I owe him everything. But yesterday he attacked me. He didn't recognize me. He thought I was an intruder. He tried to stab me with a kitchen knife. If we don't get control of his medical and financial decisions immediately, he is going to hurt himself or someone else. We just want to protect him. We want to put him in a facility where he can get the 24-hour care he deserves." I gripped the armrest of my wheelchair. He didn't want to protect me. He wanted to lock me away in a padded room so he could sell my assets to pay off the mob. Then it was Brittany's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her head bowed, clutching a tissue. She sat down and looked at me with an expression of pure terror. It was a performance worthy of Broadway. "Mrs. Freeman, tell the court what happened yesterday," the lawyer asked. Brittany took a shaky breath. "We brought him home from the first facility because we thought we could care for him. But he became violent. He started screaming at me, calling me names. He hit me." She pulled down the collar of her blouse, revealing a dark purple bruise on her collarbone. I knew exactly where that bruise came from. She had walked into a doorframe 2 days ago while drunk on my expensive champagne. He struck me. "Your Honor," she sobbed. "He said I was stealing his money. He is paranoid. He thinks everyone is out to get him. I am terrified to be in the house with him, but I can't leave him alone. Please grant us guardianship. It is the only way we can keep everyone safe." The courtroom was silent. Judge Higgins looked at me with pity and concern. The narrative was perfect. The evidence seemed irrefutable. A violent, senile old man and his loving, long-suffering children. Darius looked at me and smirked. It was a small, barely perceptible quirk of his lips, but I saw it. He thought it was over. He thought the gavel was about to fall. It was time. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. A man walked in. He was tall, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy. He wore a charcoal suit and walked with the confidence of a man who owned the building. It was not a public defender. It was Arthur Davis, the most expensive and ruthless litigator in the state. Malcolm had hired him 3 hours ago using the emergency funds from the Freeman Trust. Judge Higgins looked up over her glasses. "Who are you, and why are you interrupting my proceedings?" Arthur Davis walked past the bar and placed his briefcase on my table. "I am Arthur Davis, Your Honor, and I am entering my appearance as counsel for Mr. Bernard Freeman." Darius stood up, his face flushing red. "Objection. My father is incompetent. He cannot hire a lawyer. He doesn't even know what day it is." Mr. Davis turned to Darius, his smile cold and sharp. "On the contrary, Mr. Freeman, your father hired me this morning, and he was quite specific about his instructions. He would like to present evidence to refute your claims." Judge Higgins looked intrigued. "Evidence? What kind of evidence?" "Digital forensics." "Your Honor," Mr. Davis said, pulling a laptop from his bag and plugging it into the court's AV system. "If the plaintiffs claim Mr. Freeman is mentally incompetent and unaware of his surroundings, perhaps we should examine the environment they have created for him." Darius looked at Brittany. Panic flickered in his eyes. They hadn't swept the house for bugs. They had been too busy looting it. Mr. Davis pressed a key. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The video was grainy black and white infrared, but the audio was crystal clear. It was the basement of my house. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. The courtroom watched as Darius and Brittany came into view. They were standing in front of the safe holding a power drill and a crowbar. This old bastard Darius's voice rang out through the speakers loud and hateful. He changed the code. "I am going to kill him. I swear to God I am going to kill him." Brittany laughed on the recording. "Just drill it out. Once we get the bonds, we can dump him in the state-run home. Let him rot in his own filth. Who cares? He will be dead in a month anyway." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Judge Higgins sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing. Mr. Davis skipped forward. The video changed. It was the living room, the night of the party. Darius was holding a glass of scotch, toasting the air. To the dumbest man alive, Darius shouted on screen. He signed the paper. He actually signed it. "We are rich, baby. $10 million in dirt, and the old fool didn't even know it." The video cut again. This time it was the bedroom from yesterday. The angle was from the smoke detector looking down at the bed where I lay motionless. "Is he out?" Brittany asked on the recording. "He is gone," Darius replied. "Dr. Thorne gave him enough juice to knock out a horse. He won't remember his own name, let alone the signature. Get the deed. Let's steal this land and get out of here." Darius was standing in the courtroom shaking. His face had gone from red to a sickly shade of gray. Brittany was gripping the railing of the witness stand, her knuckles white. That is Dr. Darius stammered. "That is a deep fake. That is AI. My father is manipulating you." Mr. Davis paused the video on a freeze frame of Darius holding the syringe over my arm. This video was uploaded in real time to a secure cloud server. "Your Honor," Mr. Davis said calmly, "the metadata is verified. But if you need more proof, perhaps we should hear from the man himself." Darius laughed a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Hear from him. Look at him. He is drooling. He is a vegetable." I stopped shaking. I lifted my head. I reached up and adjusted my collar. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs, pushing out the last remnants of the old man act. I sat up straight, my spine snapping into alignment. I turned my head and locked eyes with Darius. The look of shock on his face was worth every second of this nightmare. "I am not a vegetable, Darius," I said, my voice booming in the quiet room, "and I am certainly not drooling." I stood up. I didn't use the armrests. I didn't wobble. I stood tall and firm, just like I did when I managed the loading docks for 30 years. Brittany let out a small, strangled squeak. "Your Honor," I addressed the judge, my voice steady and clear. "My son and his wife have engaged in a systematic campaign to defraud me, poison me, and imprison me. They have forged my signature, stolen my identity, and attempted to coerce me into signing away property rights worth millions of dollars." Judge Higgins looked at me stunned. She looked at the video, still frozen on the screen. She looked at Darius, who was now backing away toward the aisle. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "you seem remarkably lucid." "I am, Your Honor," I said, "but I wasn't yesterday." Mr. Davis handed me a file. I opened it and pulled out a medical report. "This is a toxicology report from a blood sample taken 2 hours ago at University Hospital," I said, handing it to the bailiff. "It shows high concentrations of scopolamine and benzodiazepines in my system, drugs that are not prescribed to me, drugs that cause confusion, memory loss, and compliance." I pointed a finger at Darius. "My son had a man he called a doctor inject me with these drugs yesterday afternoon to force me to sign a deed transfer. He didn't care if the dosage killed me. He only cared about the money." Darius looked around the room. He saw the bailiffs moving toward the doors, blocking the exits. He saw the judge's face hardening into stone. "It is a lie," he screamed, losing all control. "He is lying. He is the one who is crazy. He has a secret fortune. He has millions, and he wouldn't give me a dime. I deserve that money. I am his son. You are a thief," I said, cutting him off. "You are a predator. You looked at your mother's coffin and saw a payday. You looked at me and saw an obstacle." I took a step toward him. "You wanted a signature, Darius. You wanted power of attorney. Well, you got it. But you signed it with invisible ink on a blank page. And the deed you tried to sell to your mob friends last night, it was invalid. I left out my middle initial. You sold them a worthless piece of paper." Darius's eyes went wide with true horror. The realization hit him. He hadn't just lost the court case. He had defrauded the Italian syndicate. He was a dead man walking. Judge Higgins banged her gavel. It sounded like Judgment Day. "Enough," she stated. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. Bailiff, take Mr. Darius Freeman and Mrs. Brittany Freeman into custody immediately. I am holding them in contempt of court pending charges for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. No! Brittany shrieked as the bailiff grabbed her arm. It wasn't me. It was him. He made me do it. Darius didn't scream. He just stared at me, his eyes empty. Why, he whispered as they cuffed him. Why didn't you just give me the money? I looked at him and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the cold clarity of a ledger balanced. Because you didn't earn it, I said, and you certainly don't deserve it. They dragged them out the side door. The courtroom was silent again. I looked at the judge. Thank you. Your Honor, I said. She nodded slowly. Mr. Freeman, I suggest you get a restraining order, and maybe a security detail. I don't need a detail, I said, buttoning my jacket. I have a clean slate. I turned to Mr. Davis. Let's go, Arthur. We have one more stop to make. My wife is waiting for me, and I believe she has a story to tell. Darius was cornered, but like a rat in a trap, he decided to bite back. He gripped the edge of the defense table, his knuckles white, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. The bailiffs were moving in, but he waved them off, shouting over the murmur of the courtroom. You are insane, he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. All of this is smoke and mirrors. You drugged yourself, old man. You staged this whole thing to frame me because you hate that I am successful. You hate that I tried to help you. He turned to the judge, his eyes wide and manic. Your Honor, you cannot believe him. He is paranoid. He creates fantasies, just like with Mom. He blames me for her death, but everyone knows she had a bad heart. It was natural causes. She died in her sleep. I was the one who found her. I was the one who tried to perform CPR while he just stood there in shock. I tried to save her life. I watched him lie. It was breathtaking in its audacity. He was rewriting history in real-time, banking on the fact that the only person who could contradict him was ashes in an urn. He thought he was safe because dead women tell no tales. He thought the closed casket funeral and the rushed cremation had erased his sins. He looked at the gallery, playing to the audience. I loved my mother. I would never hurt her. Her heart gave out. The coroner signed off on it. There was no autopsy because it was clearly natural. My father is twisting a tragedy into a conspiracy theory because he is sick. He needs help, not a victory lap. Brittany nodded vigorously beside him, her tears drying up as she latched onto this new lifeline. Yes, she hissed. Esther was sick for years. We all knew it was coming. Darius was a saint to her. He visited her every week. He brought her special teas. Special teas. I felt a surge of bile in my throat. Darius gained confidence, seeing the judge hesitate slightly. Without a body, there was no proof of murder. Just my word against his. You have no evidence. Darius sneered at me. You have a video of me trying to get you to sign a paper to save our family assets. That is not a crime. That is stewardship. But you have nothing on Mom. She is gone. Let her rest in peace and stop dragging her memory through the mud to hurt me. Mr. Davis, my lawyer, stepped forward. He didn't look at Darius. He looked at the bailiff standing by the double doors at the back of the room. Your Honor, Mr. Davis said, his voice cutting through Darius's rant like a razor. The defense claims there is no evidence regarding the death of Esther Freeman. The defense claims the witness is deceased. However, we would like to call a surprise witness to the stand. Darius laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Who are you going to call? A medium. Are you going to hold a seance? Mr. Davis smiled. No, Mr. Freeman. We are calling the victim. The heavy oak doors swung open. The sound of the hinges groaned in the silence. Every head in the courtroom turned. Darius froze, his mouth half open in a mockery of a smile. Brittany gripped the table so hard her fingernails scraped the wood. A wheelchair rolled into the room, pushed by Malcolm, and sitting in it, frail but upright, wearing her Sunday best blue dress, was Esther. She was pale. Her hair was thinner than before, but her eyes were bright and focused, and they were locked on her son. The sound that came out of Darius was not human. It was a strangled gurgle, a sound of a mind snapping under the weight of an impossible reality. He stumbled back, knocking his chair over. He scrambled away from the aisle as if he were seeing a demon. Mom, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Brittany screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek of pure terror. She covered her face with her hands, shaking violently. No, no, no. She is dead. We burned her. We paid for the cremation. Nia, who had been sitting in the back row trying to make herself invisible, stood up. Her face drained of all color. She looked from her mother to her brother, then back to the door. She started to hyperventilate, gasping for air, clutching her designer handbag to her chest. She had put the poison in the food at the wake, but she knew Darius had handled the main event. She knew her mother was supposed to be Ash. Seeing her flesh and blood was too much. Her knees buckled and she slid down the wall to the floor, sobbing silently. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel, but no one heard it. The shock was absolute. Esther didn't look at the chaos. She kept her eyes on Darius. She signaled Malcolm to push her forward. The wheels squeaked softly on the floor. It was the only sound Darius could hear. He was pressed against the prosecution table, trapped. He stammered. "You are a ghost." "I am not a ghost," Darius, Esther said. Her voice was weak, raspy from the damage to her throat, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I am your mother, and I am very much alive." She rolled past him to the witness stand. The bailiff helped her transfer from the wheelchair to the seat. She took the oath, her hands steady on the Bible. Mr. Davis approached her gently. "Mrs. Freeman, can you tell the court what happened on the night of October 14th? Esther took a deep breath. She looked at the judge, then at the jury, and finally she turned her gaze back to the man she had given birth to. "It was a Tuesday," she began. "Darius came over for dinner. That was rare. He usually only came when he needed money. But he was sweet that night. He brought me a special blend of herbal tea. He said it would help with my heart palpitations." She paused, taking a sip of water. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "It tasted bitter," she continued. "Like copper. I didn't want to drink it. But he insisted. He said he had it specially made. He stood over me until I finished the cup." Darius was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face. "No, Mom, stop. Please stop." 10 minutes later, my chest felt heavy, Esther said, ignoring him. My arms went numb. I tried to call out to Bernie, but my throat wouldn't work. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I slid out of my chair onto the floor. She looked at me, and for a moment her eyes softened, filled with the love we had shared for 40 years. Then they hardened again as she looked at Darius. "I was paralyzed," she said, "but I could still hear. I could still see. I saw Darius standing over me. He didn't call 911. He didn't check my airway. He checked my pulse." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge looked horrified. "He checked my pulse," she repeated. And then he smiled. He pulled out his phone and called his wife. I heard him say exactly these words. "The witch is dead. Get the papers ready. We are rich." Brittany was sobbing loudly now, rocking back and forth. "Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" "He left me there on the rug," Esther said. "He waited 20 minutes before he started screaming for help. He waited until he was sure I was gone. When the paramedics came, I tried to move my finger. I tried to blink, but I was locked in my own body. I heard them pronounce me dead. I felt them put me in the bag. I felt the zipper close over my face." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Do you know what it is like to be trapped in the dark, knowing your own son put you there? Knowing you are on your way to an oven because your child wanted to buy a bigger house?" Darius collapsed. He fell to his knees, sobbing into his hands. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I just needed the money. It was supposed to be painless." "You buried me alive," Esther said, her voice ringing with judgment. "If not for Malcolm and the driver, I would be ash right now. You didn't just kill me, Darius. You erased me. And for what? For greed." Mr. Davis turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I believe the witness has established that the defendant's claims of natural causes are entirely fabricated. We move to add attempted murder to the charges." Judge Higgins looked at Darius, who was a heap of broken arrogance on the floor. She looked at Brittany, who was catatonic with fear. She looked at Nia, who was being attended to by a medic in the back. Motion granted, the judge said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Darius looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "Mom, please. I am your son. Forgive me." Esther looked at him. She didn't cry. She didn't waver. "I have no son," she said. "My son died a long time ago. You are just a stranger who wears his face." She turned to me. "Let's go home, Bernie. I am tired." The bailiffs hauled Darius to his feet. He screamed as they dragged him away, but his screams meant nothing. The truth had been spoken, and it was heavier than any sentence the court could pass. I walked over to Esther and took her hand. It was warm. It was real. And together we watched them take the monsters away. The bail bondsman looked at me like I was crazy. He tapped the glass partition with a pen, gesturing to the 3 figures slumped on the metal bench in the holding cell. "You sure about this, Mr. Freeman?" he asked. The judge set the bail high. "If they run, you are on the hook for $500,000. I looked at Darius, Brittany, and Naya. They looked small. Stripped of their designer clothes, their phones, and their arrogance, they looked like what they were. Children who had broken something they couldn't fix. "I am sure," I said, pulling out the checkbook from my pocket. "I want them released into my custody for 24 hours. Darius looked up when he heard my voice. Hope flared in his eyes, pathetic and desperate. "Dad," he croaked, rushing to the bars. "I knew it. I knew you wouldn't leave us in here. It was a mistake, Dad. A terrible mistake. We can explain everything." I didn't answer him. I signed the check. I handed it to the bondsman. I wasn't doing this out of love. I wasn't doing it out of mercy. I was doing it because prison was too safe for them right now. In prison, they were protected by guards and bars. In prison, the consequences of their outside actions couldn't reach them. But Darius had made a deal with the devil to sell land that wasn't his. And the devil was waiting. I drove them back to the house in silence. They sat in the back of my rental car, huddled together, whispering. They thought I was saving them. They thought I was the old soft touch who would fix everything. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. It looked like a skull, empty and hollow. "You stay here tonight," I said, unlocking the front door. "Don't leave. The police have trackers on your ankles. If you step off the property, you go back to jail, and I revoke the bail." But Dad, Darius pleaded. "We have no food. The electricity is off." "Figure it out," I said. "You are the smart one, Darius. You are the financial wizard." I turned and walked back to the car. "Wait!" Brittany screamed. "Where are you going?" "You can't leave us here alone." I got in the car and rolled down the window. "I am going to a hotel with my wife," I said. "Sleep tight." I drove away, but I didn't go far. I parked down the street, logged into the remote security app on my phone, and watched. I had reactivated the cameras and the backup generator for the security system. I wasn't going to miss this. Inside the house, the panic set in immediately. The house was stripped bare from their earlier looting. No beds, no chairs, just the card table and the empty walls. "What are we going to do?" Nia sobbed, sitting on the floor in her ruined dress. "I can't go back to jail. It smells like bleach and despair." "Shut up," Darius snapped, pacing the empty living room. "We need to think. Dad bailed us out. That means he still cares. We can work him. We just need time." "Time?" Brittany laughed hysterically. "We don't have time. We have court in the morning. And we have—" She stopped. A car had pulled up outside. Not a police cruiser, not a taxi. It was a black SUV with tinted windows. Then another, and another. Darius froze. He ran to the window and peeked through the blinds. His face went white. "Oh, God," he whispered. "It is Russo." "Who?" Brittany asked, grabbing his arm. "The buyer," Darius said, his voice trembling. "The man I promised the land to. The man I tried to give the fake deed." The front door didn't open. It exploded. A heavy boot kicked the lock mechanism, shattering the wood frame. 3 men walked in. They were huge, wearing leather jackets that creaked as they moved. They didn't look like businessmen. They looked like pain. The man in the middle was shorter, older, with silver hair and eyes like polished flint. That was Russo. "Darius," he said, his voice calm and terrifying. "You are a hard man to reach." Darius backed away, putting his hands up. "Mr. Russo, I can explain. There was a complication. My father, he tricked me. The deed—" Russo didn't let him finish. He snapped his fingers. One of the large men stepped forward and backhanded Darius across the face. The sound was like a pistol shot. Darius spun around and fell to the floor, blood spraying from his lip. "You sold me a napkin," Darius Russo said, stepping over him. "You wasted my time. My partners are very upset. They had equipment moving. They had permits filed, and now I look like a fool." "Please," Darius begged, crawling backward, crab-walking across the hardwood floor. I can fix it. I just need a few days. My father has the land. He is right here in town. I can get him to sign the real one." "You had your chance," Russo said. "Now I want my money. The 10,000 deposit I fronted you for expenses. And the interest. Let's call it 50,000 for the inconvenience." "I don't have it," Darius cried. "I spent it. We spent it on the lawyer, on the car." Russo looked around the empty room. He looked at Nia, who was curled in a ball in the corner. He looked at Brittany, who was standing frozen by the fireplace. "Well then," Russo said, "we are going to have to take something else." He looked at Brittany. She was still wearing her diamond earrings, real ones, the last thing she hadn't sold. "Take those," Russo ordered his men. One of the thugs moved toward Brittany. "No," she screamed, backing away. "These are mine!" Darius did something then that made me ashamed to share DNA with him. He didn't stand up. He didn't fight. He scrambled to his feet and grabbed Brittany by the shoulders. "Give them to him," he shouted, shaking her. "Give him the earrings and the ring. Give him the wedding ring, Brittany." He was pushing her toward the man, using her body as a shield between himself and the debt he had created. "Darius, stop!" Brittany shrieked, clawing at his hands. "You coward! Get off me!" She spent the money. Darius yelled at Russo, pointing at his wife. It was her idea. She wanted the renovations. She wanted the clothes. "Take her. She is the one who owes you." The thug grabbed Brittany's earlobe and ripped the earring out. She screamed a raw, bloody sound. He took the other one. Then he grabbed her left hand and wrenched the ring off her finger. Russo looked at the jewelry in his man's hand. He sneered. "This is maybe 5 grand, he said. "You still owe me 45. He walked up to Darius. Darius was sobbing now, snot running down his face, begging, pleading. "Please, I will do anything. I will work for you." "I don't hire failures," Russo said. He nodded to his men. They grabbed the card table and smashed it against the wall. They kicked holes in the drywall. They took a baseball bat to the windows, shattering the glass. It was methodical destruction. They were turning the house into a ruin. "This is a warning," Russo said over the noise of breaking glass. "You have 24 hours. Find the money, sell a kidney, rob a bank. I don't care. If I don't have my cash by tomorrow night, next time we won't be breaking the house. We will be breaking you." They turned and walked out, leaving the front door hanging off its hinges. The SUVs roared away into the night. Inside the house, the silence returned heavier than before. Darius was curled on the floor, holding his ribs. Brittany was touching her bleeding ear, staring at her husband with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Nia was rocking back and forth, muttering to herself. "You pushed me," Brittany whispered. Her voice was flat dead. "You pushed me at them." "I had to," Darius whimpered. "They were going to kill me." "You are garbage," Brittany spat. She stood up, shaky but standing. She walked over to him and kicked him in the stomach. Hard. "I am leaving," she said. "You can't." Darius gasped. "The ankle monitor—" "I don't care," Brittany screamed. "I would rather go to jail. I would rather go to hell than spend another second with you." She walked out the broken door into the darkness. The alarm on her ankle bracelet started beeping, a high-pitched electronic wail that signaled the end of her freedom. Nia looked at her father. "Dad?" she said, her voice small. "What do we do?" Darius sat up. He looked around the wrecked room. He looked at the holes in the walls. He looked at the emptiness where his life used to be. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Dad," he whispered into the phone. "Dad, please pick up." I watched him on my screen. I saw his name pop up on my phone. I didn't answer. I let it ring. He called again. And again. "Dad, save us. Please. The mob. They came. They are going to kill us." I watched him break down. I watched him realize that there was no safety net, no bailout, no daddy to fix it. There was no way out. He had no money. He had no friends. He had no wife. And his parents, the people he had tried to murder, were the only ones who could help him, and we were ghosting him. He threw the phone across the room. It smashed against the wall. He put his head in his hands and howled. It was the sound of a wolf caught in a trap of its own making. I closed the app. I turned to Esther, who was sitting up in the hotel bed reading a book. "Is it done?" she asked softly. "It is done," I said. "They know." "Know what?" "That they are alone." I turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, I slept without dreaming of falling. Tomorrow the police would come for the parole violation. Tomorrow the bank would finalize the foreclosure. But tonight justice had been served cold and brutal in the living room of the house they tried to steal. The blue lights of the police cruisers flooded the living room, illuminating the wreckage of what used to be my home. The silence that had followed Russo's departure was shattered by the wail of sirens and the shouting of SWAT officers. I had timed it perfectly. I knew Russo would come. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist the bait of a $10 million debt, and I knew Darius would be helpless to stop him. I stepped out of my rental car and walked up the driveway. The night air was filled with the static of police radios. Russo's SUVs had been boxed in at the end of the street. I watched as the officers dragged the mob boss and his thugs out of their vehicles, slamming them against the hoods. Russo wasn't so tough now. He looked old and tired, his expensive coat muddied as he was cuffed and shoved into the back of a squad car. I walked through the broken front door. The house was swarming with uniforms. In the center of the living room, Darius and Nia were on their knees, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Brittany was there too. The police had picked her up 2 blocks away, her ankle monitor pinging like a beacon. She looked like a drowned rat, her hair plastered to her face, her expensive clothes torn. They looked up when I entered. The room went quiet. The officers nodded to me, recognizing the man who had orchestrated the sting. I wasn't the victim here. I was the witness. I was the judge. Darius scrambled on his knees toward me. His face was a mess of blood and snot. One eye was swollen shut from Russo's backhand. "Dad," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Dad, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them I have the assets to cover the debt." I stopped in front of him. I looked down at the boy I had raised, the man who had tried to bury me. "You have nothing, Darius?" I said, my voice calm and cold. "The assets are gone. The house is foreclosed. The accounts are frozen. You are destitute." Darius shook his head violently, spraying blood on the floor. "No, the land. The Georgia land. You said it was worth millions. You said it was a data center hub. We can sell it, Dad. Please, just sign the deed. The real one this time. We can pay Russo. We can pay the lawyers. We can make this go away." He was still trying to deal. He was still trying to hustle. He didn't understand that the game was over. I signaled the officer to step back. I wanted Darius to hear this clearly. I wanted him to understand the magnitude of his loss. "You are right," I said. "The land is worth a fortune." The tech company finished their appraisal yesterday. They offered $10.5 million for the site. Darius's eyes widened. Greed flickered through the fear. "10 million," he whispered. "Dad, please. That is enough for all of us. We can start over. I will be good. I promise. Just give me a share. Just enough to save my life." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You think this is about money?" I asked. "You still think this is about cash?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was thick, printed on heavy legal paper. "I signed the transfer this morning, Darius," I said, holding the paper up so he could see the seal. He gasped, a look of pure salvation washing over his face. "You did. You saved us." "I didn't save you," I said. I opened the document and read the first paragraph aloud. "I, Bernard Freeman, hereby transfer the full title and ownership of the property located in Sector 4, Georgia, to the Future Scholars Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing college scholarships for underprivileged youth in this community." Darius froze. His mouth hung open. "You gave it away," he whispered. "Every acre," I said. "Every tree. Every drop of water rights. I donated it all. $10 million worth of potential. Gone." "Why?" Darius screamed, the sound tearing from his throat. "Why would you do that? It was our legacy. It was my inheritance." "It wasn't your inheritance," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "It was never yours. You didn't earn it. You didn't respect it. And you certainly didn't deserve it." I took a step closer, leaning down so our faces were inches apart. "And there is something else you need to know, Darius. Something your mother and I never told you because we wanted you to feel like you belonged. We wanted you to feel equal to Richard." Darius blinked, confusion warring with his panic. "What about Richard?" "You always hated him," I said. "You killed him because you thought he was the favorite, because you thought he was the heir to the Freeman bloodline." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You were adopted, Darius." The color drained from his face completely, leaving him gray and ashen. What he breathed. We took you in when you were 2 years old, I said. Your biological parents were addicts who left you in a shelter. We gave you a home. We gave you a name. We gave you love. We loved you just as much as we loved Richard. Tears streamed down his face, washing away the blood. But you, I continued, my voice hard as iron, you looked at that love and you saw weakness. You killed the brother who shared his room with you. You tried to kill the parents who saved you from the system. And for what? For money that you were too lazy to earn yourself. You aren't my blood, Darius, and after what you did, you aren't my son either. Darius collapsed. He put his forehead on the floor and wailed. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the cry of a man realizing that his entire life, his jealousy, his greed, his crimes had been based on a lie he told himself. He had destroyed everything for a birthright that he had already been given as a gift, and he had thrown it away. Brittany had been listening. She had been staring at the floor, her body shaking. But when I said the words $10 million and donated, something inside her snapped. She looked at Darius. She looked at the man she had conspired with, the man she had married for a payday that was never coming. 10 million, she whispered. She lunged. It happened so fast the officers almost missed it. Brittany threw herself at Darius, her handcuffed hands raised like a club. She screamed a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. You idiot, she shrieked, bringing her fists down on his head. You useless idiot. We could have had it all. You told me you had it handled. You told me he would sign. Darius curled into a ball, trying to protect his head. Brittany kicked him, screaming obscenities, blaming him for the nursing home plan, blaming him for the poison, blaming him for her ruined life. He had $10 million, she screamed, spittle flying from her mouth. And you let him give it to charity. I hate you. I hate you. The police grabbed her, hauling her off him. She thrashed and kicked, biting at the air, completely unhinged. Get off me, she yelled at the cops. Arrest him. He is the one who screwed up. He is the loser. I deserve that money. I put up with his smell. I put up with his gambling. I deserve to be paid. They dragged her out of the room, kicking and screaming. Her voice echoed down the hallway, a testament to a soul completely consumed by greed. Nia sat in the corner, silent. She stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't say a word. She knew there was nothing left to say. She had seen her brother broken and her sister-in-law go mad. She knew her turn was coming. I looked at Darius one last time. He was lying on the floor, sobbing into the dust. Goodbye, Darius, I said. He looked up, his eyes pleading. Dad, please, don't leave me here. They will kill me in prison. Russo has guys on the inside. I turned my back on him. You should have thought of that before you sold them a napkin, I said. I walked out of the house. I walked past the police cars, past the neighbors who had gathered on their lawns to watch the spectacle. I walked to my car where Malcolm was waiting. He started the engine. Where to, Bernie? He asked. To the hotel, I said. Esther is waiting for dinner. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the flashing lights. I had burnt it all down. And from the ashes, I was finally free. The gavel came down with a sound like a rifle shot, ending the war that had raged in my family for months. The trial had been a spectacle, but the sentencing was a funeral for 3 lives that had been wasted on greed. Darius stood before the judge, trembling in his orange jumpsuit. The arrogance that had defined him, the sneer he had worn at his mother's fake funeral, was gone. He looked small. He looked like a child who had realized too late that the monster in the closet was real. The judge was merciless. 25 years for Darius. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. There was no parole eligibility for 15 years. Brittany received 15 years for her role as an accomplice and for the financial crimes. Nia got 8 years. As they were led away in chains, I didn't feel joy. I felt a hollow sense of closure. It was a transaction completed, a debt collected. But the real sentence for Darius wasn't the time, it was the location. Because prisons have their own economy and their own hierarchy, and Darius had entered that world with a debt on his head. Russo, the mob boss I had trapped alongside my son, had friends on the inside. Powerful friends. Word reached me a week later through Malcolm. Darius had been placed in general population. He wasn't running the block. He wasn't making deals. He was terrified. He had requested protective custody 3 times and been denied. His cellmate was a man known for his loyalty to the syndicate. Darius was going to spend the next 2 decades looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows, living in a constant state of terror. He had tried to imprison me in a nursing home to pay his debts, but instead he had built his own cage and locked himself inside with the tigers. I visited the prison only once, not to gloat, but to sign the final paperwork severing my legal ties to him. I saw him through the thick plexiglass. He had a black eye and a split lip. He pressed his hand against the glass, his eyes pleading. "Dad," he mouthed. "Help me. They are going to kill me." I looked at him, and I saw the man who had watched my wife suffocate. I saw the man who had pushed his brother off a cliff. I picked up the phone. "You made your bed, Darius," I said, my voice flat. "Now you have to sleep in it." I hung up the phone and walked away, leaving him screaming silently behind the glass. That was the last time I saw my son. The next step was exorcising the ghosts. The house on Elm Street was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. It was a mausoleum of betrayal. Every room held a memory I wanted to burn. The kitchen where Nia poisoned the soup. The bedroom where Darius drugged me. The basement where they tried to drill into my life savings. I couldn't breathe there anymore. The air felt heavy with the residue of their hatred. I didn't list it on the market. I didn't want strangers walking through judging the holes in the walls or the broken door. I called a developer. I knew a man who bought properties for the land value alone. I sold it to him for cash 2 days later. He told me he planned to bulldoze it and build 2 modern spec homes on the lot. "Good," I told him. "Knock it down. Grind it to dust. I don't want a single brick left standing." The day the bulldozers came, Esther and I parked down the street to watch. It should have been sad. That house had seen 40 years of our lives. It had seen Christmas mornings and birthday parties. It had seen us young and hopeful. But as the heavy machine clawed through the roof, tearing into the master bedroom with a screech of rending wood, I felt lighter. I felt the weight of the last 25 years, the weight of the secrets and the lies crumbling along with the drywall. When the chimney collapsed into a pile of red dust, I reached over and took Esther's hand. She squeezed it back. "It is just a house, Bernie," she said softly. "We are the home." We moved 3 days later. We didn't go to a retirement community. We didn't go to a quiet little cottage. We bought a penthouse in the city overlooking the harbor. It was on the 42nd floor. The security was tighter than Fort Knox. You needed a key card just to operate the elevator. There were doormen who knew our names and who kept the world at bay. The apartment was all glass and steel and light. It had no dark corners. It had no basements. It was open and free, just like us. We bought new furniture, modern, sleek things that had no history. We filled the space with art we actually liked, not the things we bought to look respectable for the neighbors. We started over. At 69 years old, we hit the reset button. Esther's recovery was slow but steady. The hypoxia had left her with a slight tremor in her left hand, but her mind was sharp as a tack. She started painting again, setting up an easel in the sunroom that overlooked the ocean. She painted storms. She painted turbulent, dark oceans crashing against jagged rocks. But in every painting there was a lighthouse, a single beam of light cutting through the dark. I knew who that lighthouse was. We adopted a dog. Not a golden retriever this time. We got a rescue, a scruffy terrier mix with one ear that stood up and one that flopped down. We named him Lucky. He slept at the foot of our bed and barked at the wind. He was perfect. Life settled into a new rhythm, a rhythm of peace. No more late-night phone calls asking for money. No more tense Sunday dinners where we walked on eggshells trying not to upset the children who hated us. We woke up when we wanted. We ate what we wanted. We traveled. We spent a month in Tuscany drinking wine and eating pasta. We took a train across the Canadian Rockies. We lived the life we had deferred for decades, the life we had sacrificed to raise wolves who tried to eat us. One evening 6 months after the trial, we were sitting on the balcony of the penthouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The city lights were flickering on below us, a sea of diamonds that couldn't touch us up here. I poured 2 glasses of a vintage Cabernet, a wine that cost more than my first car. It tasted like freedom. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a jarring sound in the tranquility of the evening. I frowned. Few people had this number. Malcolm, the lawyer, the doctor. I picked it up. It was a text message. The ID read, State Correctional Facility Inmate Messaging Service. My stomach tightened. I opened the message. Dad, it is Darius. Please, I need money for the commissary. I am hungry, Dad. The food here makes me sick, and I need to pay for protection. Russo's guys are pressing me. They say if I don't pay by Friday, they are going to hurt me. Please, Dad. Just a few hundred. I am your son. Don't let me die in here. I stared at the words. I remembered the soup. I remembered the needle. I remembered the cliff. I remembered him standing over my wife, watching her die and checking her pulse, not to save her but to count his inheritance. I looked at Esther. She was watching me, her eyes calm and knowing. She knew who it was. She didn't ask. She just took a sip of her wine and looked out at the horizon. Is it important? She asked. I looked back at the screen. I saw a man who had never learned. A man who still thought he could manipulate his way out of consequences. A man who thought the title of son was a blank check he could cash forever. No, I said. It is just spam. I tapped the screen. I didn't reply. I didn't send money. I didn't offer advice. I pressed block caller. Then I went into the settings and blocked the entire domain of the correctional facility. I set the phone down on the table face down. I picked up my wine glass. The cool evening breeze ruffled my hair. I felt a profound sense of release. The final tether had been cut. The last weight had been dropped. I looked at Esther, my partner, my survivor, my wife. She smiled at me and clinked her glass against mine. To us, she said. I smiled back. To us. I looked at the tickets sitting on the counter inside. First class, around the world, 3 months, no phones, no internet, just the two of us and the open sea. You know, I said, taking her hand. I was thinking about the itinerary for the cruise. What about it? She asked. I think we should extend it, I said. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. We have the time, we have the money, and we certainly don't have anyone waiting for us back here. Esther laughed, a sound that was light and free and devoid of the shadows that had haunted us for so long. I think that sounds perfect, she said. I looked out at the city one last time. Down there in the dark, Darius was in a cell of his own making. Brittany was in hers. Naya was in hers. They were paying the price for their greed. But up here in the light, we were finally debt-free. This trip, I said, raising my glass to the stars, this trip is just for the two of us, and for the first time in my life I truly meant it. The past was dead, the children were strangers, and the future was a wide-open ocean waiting to be explored. This journey taught me the most painful yet liberating lesson of my life. Family is defined by loyalty, not DNA. For years I mistook my role as a provider for a guarantee of love, never realizing I was merely feeding wolves who were waiting to devour me. I learned that protecting your peace sometimes requires burning bridges, even if those bridges lead to your own children. It is never too late to stand up for your dignity, to rewrite your ending, and to understand that the only people who deserve a seat at your table are the ones who bring nothing but love. If you believe that justice was served today, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of truth and redemption. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven them? 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 Would you have forgiven them?